Welcome to the Tech Tempest. I'm Sean, and I'm going to be changing out the thermal paste on the CPU. Things you're going to need are your finger and thumbs, paper towel and microfiber cloth, isopropyl alcohol, and thermal paste. That's really it. So let's get into it. What you want to do first before you even think about taking out the CPU is to warm it up. So run a game, run a benchmark, anything that warms up the thermal paste. This way, when you pull the CPU block out, it doesn't take out the CPU along with it. So we have to prepare a little bit. The first thing you can do is maybe take out the GPU. It's big and could get in your way. The next thing that we have to do is remove the fan and RGB cables from the motherboard. This way, so when you pull the pump block out, you have a little slack to put it over on the side. So in my case, I have 2 thumb screws, top and bottom. You may have 4 screws if you have an Intel CPU. So what you want to do this is do this in an alternating fashion. So in my case, I do top and bottom to take less pressure off of one side of the CPU. So I'll do top and bottom. If you have 4, just do top right, bottom left, top left, and bottom right. Once your retention screws are off and your thermal paste is warm and malleable, you don't want to pull the block straight up. You want to twist it a little left and right, a couple millimeters each way until you feel it slip off. And then you slowly lift it up as you're twisting. This way the CPU is still in the motherboard socket. No problem. So once the cooler is off, what you want to do is start cleaning the thermal paste off of the CPU. So just get a piece of paper towel or a microfiber cloth and work your way from the outside in. This way you don't get any thermal paste on the outside of the chip. And on the block, just clean that off completely until you get bare copper. And then you get some isopropyl alcohol on the paper towel or microfiber cloth and just clean up the rest of the residue. So now that the CPU is nice and clean with isopropyl alcohol, it's time to put on the thermal paste. A lot of people get nervous with this part, but it's really easy. What I like to do is to do 4 corners and the center, so top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and in the center. You can just do 1 pea-sized dot and it'll spread in a circular pattern. Or you can spread the entire CPU kind of like buttering a piece of toast. You don't want to do too little and you don't want to do too much. Just use your best judgment. It's not a big deal. So I'm just going to do top left, top right, bottom right, bottom left, and 1 in the center. And that's really it. This way when I put the heat spreader on, it just spreads it around the entire CPU once it compresses down. Okay, so now comes a little bit of a tricky part with this type of bracket. This is the default AM4 bracket. They have these small retention screws and hook. They're kind of a pain, and I prefer Intel a lot better or alternative AM4 bracket coolers which have 4 corners rather than the hooks. So with these, if you have these, what I like to do is put the hook on first, and then you take the retention bracket thumb screw and screw that on just lightly. Now it won't fall off when you're angling to put the block in. So what we need to do first is to put that hole from the hook onto the hooks onto the motherboard. You don't want to hit the thermal paste at this moment. So what you want to do now is hook the bottom one first and then hook the top one and clamp it down with your finger. Now that you have it hooked on both sides, you can either tighten it at the same time on the top and bottom, or do one side and the other side alternatively, like when you took it off. And then you want to turn with your fingers until it's hand tight. And then you can go in with a screwdriver later and tighten it a little bit more, but you don't want to over tighten it. That's it, the pump is in. The next step is to put the CPU pump cable back into the pins on the motherboard. And if you have RGB, there's a cable that will go in the back of the case, probably plug into another RGB cable daisy chained. So I have my PC powered back on, and what I'm starting to hear is a little bit of bubble sound inside the pump. That's totally normal. I had the pump on its side, so some air just got jostled around in there. As the PC runs, that'll just go away, so don't worry about it. Now I'm running benchmarks using Cinebench R23. I'm seeing that my CPU temperatures are maxing out at 65.5 C. Before the thermal paste swap, I was at 75 C, sometimes even 80 C doing renderings. So this is a huge difference. I'm really happy. I'm gonna let this run for about 10 minutes to see if it gets a little bit higher of a temperature, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna stay around that. And that's it. Cinebench R23 ran for about 10 minutes and my thermals actually stayed at 65.5 the entire time, which is fantastic compared to what it was at before, around 75 and 80 degrees Celsius. And that leads me into my upcoming video, which would be about how to test your thermals on your CPU, your GPU, using tools like Cinebench R23, Hardware Info, Afterburner, and AIDA64. So if you found this video helpful, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so you can see more future content, and I hope to be seeing you around.